So we're on to Chapter 7 of Kill All Normies, which is basic bitches, various other bits and pieces. This is the second to last chapter, so we're nearly done. In this chapter, Nagle talks some about the aftermath of Trump's election. There were, as she notes, some conciliatory tones from a few commentators, noting that the white working class had been left behind and that the right had successfully tapped into their anxiety, I suppose, and the fact that they'd been passed over by society. That didn't last long, of course. The message went back to what it had been after a very short amount of time, and mistakes were made again very quickly, as we're seeing today in the media. But there were at least some moments of self-reflection. I personally had held out hope that the left would correct itself slightly and become sane again, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to have happened. I mean, the right, of course, isn't egalitarian, doesn't really care about the working class, only wants freedom of speech so far as it pertains to their points of view. But decades of neoliberal consensus and concentration on middle-class first world problems made the mere act of making the right kind of noises a coup for Trump and for the Brexiteers, for all that they were wrong. Both left and right establishments are terrified of the mob. The right because they're coming for their money, the left because they see them as being unenlightened and racist, or at least not as careful and polite about it as they are. Nagle tends to place more of the blame on the right, which is not something I would disagree with necessarily, but there's also plenty of blame to be handed out on the left, and as a leftist, that's where I would like to direct my commentary. Clean your own house first. There has been a tendency towards elitism, arrogance, and disconnect on the left that has brought us to where we are today. The right, in adopting a populist, if false, message, has been feeding a climate of fear and hatred, intentionally or otherwise. The thing that you have to accept is that many people truly do believe the things that they're being told, that immigration is flooding the country past a sustainable level, that no-go areas in European cities are a real and omnipresent and genuinely threatening thing more than other poor areas, that they personally would succeed if only they paid 5 less pence tax a month, and so on. If you're to persuade these people, you need to accept and understand that they truly believe the things that they're saying, even if the people telling them to them don't necessarily, but many of them do too. The arrogance on the left isn't entirely unjustified. People are collectively dumb. Half of everyone, just from the way the math works, has an IQ below 100. Not that IQ is a terribly useful measure, but you get the point. Lots of people are, relatively speaking, dumb. Many political and economic decisions are horrendously complex, and most people don't have the knowledge or intelligence to contribute meaningfully on a lot of topics. This is part of the reason we have representative democracies. Myself included, there's lots of things I couldn't give you a meaningful opinion on. These complicated issues, and so they get boiled down to emotive hot buttons like immigrants are Turking our gerbs and sovereignty, which mean nothing but trigger certain people to act in a certain way. They bypass people's conscious brains. Courts have trouble forming juries in a position to pass judgment on complex financial crimes, and many aspects of politics are just as complex, if not more so. The right has always sought to appeal to these baser instincts, these hot-button lizard brain responses, but that doesn't mean they don't also appeal to more noble ideas such as self-reliance and entrepreneurism, even if their actual policies are antithetical to these values. The appeal of that is broader than the left likes to admit. Much broader. It really appeals to these Steinbeckian, temporarily embarrassed millionaires. This elitism, in a weird way, is, as Nagle notes, also found in our online barbarian hordes. Just the term normies indicates that, a techno-snobbishness, a subcultural elitism in being outsiders that one has found in many subcultures. As a goth in the 90s, we would talk about freaking the mundanes. That's not really any different to normies. As Nagle notes of Gabriella Coleman, trolling and associated activities exploded at the moment the internet started to become populated with non-technologically minded people. Clueless, fresh off the boat noobs, as he might put it. Nagle seems less sympathetic, but I see these actions as a pushback by digital natives and early pioneers who resent having civilization imposed on them. The commercial and normie settlement of the internet needn't have been a problem if they'd left people to their own spaces as well, but the proliferation of censorship and control is intolerable to the people who've made the internet their home first and who made the internet what it is today. As Bain might put it, "Oh, you think the internet is your ally, you merely adopted the internet. I was born in it, moulded by it." Nagle frustrates me constantly by taking things seriously that shouldn't be taken seriously, and vice versa. She quotes Weave at length, and nothing that comes out of that man's mouth, save in unguarded moments, can be trusted at all. The man is always trolling. You can't trust Weave, you can't trust what you read on Poll. Tempting as it is to conflate the online shitposting culture with the alt-right, it's just an unsafe thesis. You also can't trust that these shitlords and memesters are an uncultured proletariat. They're tech literate, often highly skilled, able, for fuck's sake, to track down Shia LaBeouf by plane contrails and a couple of stars. This isn't a proletariat, it's an elite, and collectively a massively capable one. Their elitism is more justified than many elites. Nagle's skeptical of the positives that come from this culture and credulous about the negatives. It remains the most frustrating thing about the whole book that she, despite her PhD, or perhaps because of it, just doesn't seem to grok with fullness what it is that she's examining. Her biases take over, and she's started from her conclusion that this is the alt-right, that this is right-wing, when, again, that's an unsafe thesis. Nagle particularly goes off track in her analysis of online misogyny. There's a lot of ways to read the internet rule that there are no girls on the internet. It was virtually literally true in the early days of the internet. Then it was true of particular spaces, like 4chan. Then of course you can read that phrase through the lens of anon philosophy. There are no girls on the internet. Nor any boys, nor anything in between. There are no blacks, no whites, no Asians, no gays, no straights. There's nothing but what you write and how you choose to present yourself. There's nothing but your ideas, your soul. If, as a woman, you find the anonymous internet rude, crude, and disrespectful, you're not encountering misogyny, you're encountering how men treat each other, and women. You're encountering equality without the filter of benevolent sexism. If you find that shocking and horrible, spare a thought for men who experience that all the time, from the time that they're children. Gatekeeping in nerd culture, for example, is not sexism. Everyone challenges newbies, whether it's by knowing certain technical terms, reeling off information about a certain part of the monster manual, or being able to name 3 Thundercats. Yet this is reframed as sexism and misogyny by many commentators, including Nagle. Nagle also loses me utterly when she tries to characterize new atheism as right-wing. While there are exceptions, atheists are overwhelmingly left-liberal, albeit with strong socialist and libertarian components too, and a certain number of randroids. In a survey of a secular society, only 1% of American members identified as Republican. Atheists, new or otherwise, remain strongly left-wing. It's the left that has changed. New atheism is bound up in skepticism, and skepticism finds many of the regressive left and social justice warrior assertions and arguments to be lacking. SoCal and the conceptual penis laid a lot of this postmodernist study bare for the nonsense that it was. Atheism Plus also laid this split bare, and the split was between atheists who put ideology ahead of skepticism and rationality, and the atheists who put skepticism and rationality ahead of ideology. Bad ideas shouldn't stand, whatever political wing they come from, and out of whoever's mouth they come from. Religion should be subject to criticism, whether it's Islam, Christianity, or Jainism. Philosophies should be subject to criticism, whether it's feminism, or socialism, or conservatism, or communism, or libertarianism, or objectivism, whatever. Atheists didn't shift to the right. Some atheists lost their minds, and they happened to be on what I think is erroneously called the left. Rebecca Watson, at the centre of Elevatorgate, advertised her unreasonableness and irrationality in her anecdote about her elevator encounter, which was a perfectly polite situation where a would-be suitor just made the mistake of making a subtle and offhanded proposition in a confined space. And that anecdote drew criticism to her for her overreaction, legitimate criticism. Of course, advertising her feminism also led to her being trolled, and yet again we saw the same pattern of taking trolling seriously and conflating it with the criticism in order to dismiss the criticism, something we'd later see with Quinn and Sarkeesian. Perhaps Watson's the kind of example of this in the modern age, but just less good at exploiting it for cash. This isn't hate, as Nagle would put it, for destroying a male space with feminine culture. It's resistance, in this case, to bringing irrationality and poor skepticism into a space not known for tolerating these things, then demanding special treatment for her sacred cows in a way that would never be extended to, say, neo-Nazis or flat earthers or mediums. That said, why shouldn't there be male spaces, just as there are female spaces? It seems that either both should be acceptable, or neither. Nagle does have a point in that women can be seen as a threat to the edginess and authenticity of subcultures, but that is precisely because of the actions of people like Watson seeking to force changes on those cultures, rather than enjoying them for what they are, for what attracted to them in the first place. Oh, what a lovely house. Now let's smash everything down and build something new. It just doesn't make sense. Everyone who expresses an opinion online gets hate. Men get more abuse than women, 44% to 37% according to Pew, but we take it more seriously when it's done to women. That's sexism. Misanthropy isn't misogyny when you're misanthropic towards women. This is a mistake every single feminist observer and commentator tends to make about all of this. Nagle is just so completely off base in this chapter that I'm out of commentary. Thankfully, there's only one chapter left.